Hello, everyone. Welcome to Bite Your Tongue, the podcast. I'm Denise.
And I'm Kirsten, and we hope you will join us as we explore the ins and outs of building healthy relationships with our adult children.
So let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Bite Your Tongue, the podcast. I'm Denise, and today Kirsten's not with me because I decided at the last minute to do this quick holiday episode. I thought, here we are running around frantically during this month. I think it's mid-December right now. And why are we all running around like crazy? Whatever we're celebrating, we're getting our homes ready, we're doing this, we're doing that. It's become a crazy time of year. So let's consider this a quick, short episode about visiting our adult children during the holidays, or how to prepare for them to come home and not get stressed. We're going to talk to two people, so let's get started. First, we're going to welcome Pamela Heckelman, a certified empty nest coach, speaker, and podcaster. I first found her through her podcast, Midlife Mama, and she also has a lot of great blog posts on her website. She's graciously offered all of our listeners a free handout called Your Kids Are Grown, Now What? I'll put that link in our episode notes. After Pamela, we're shifting gears and welcoming Rabbi Shlomo Shlatkin. We're definitely a secular podcast, respecting all beliefs. When I read some of the rabbi's teachings, especially about young adults, I thought he might be a great person to talk to. He's a licensed professional counselor, and what I really liked is he's a certified Imago relationship therapist. Imago relationship therapy is about couples counseling or couples therapy. And I really believe that any relationship counseling, couples, our adult children, our friends, all have some of the same techniques. I learned that through our episode with Susan Heitler. So it's all about the relationship, and I thought he'd be really great. We're going to start with Pamela. So let's dive into the conversation and get started. Welcome, Pamela. Is there anything I missed in your intro that you want to add before we get started with the episode and our questions?
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to say I'm just a mom who has failed and fallen and learned some really important lessons. And so I hope you feel like you're like that too. And we're all just here to grow a little bit.
We are. It's funny. I just posted something on Instagram of followers said, gosh, I feel this exact way. And my youngest is 24 or something. I think we all thought we were done when we were 18. And this second stage that no one understands is really the longest relationship we'll have in our lives with our kids. So I think we're all in the same boat you are. But today we're talking about holidays. It's holidays, but also anytime your adult kids come home, particularly if
Right.
they live out of state. I think there's anxiety on both parts. Why do you think people get a little bit anxious when the adult kids come home?
Well, I think because everything's changed. And the funny thing is, why is it when we get back into our mom's house, we all feel 14?
Why
Why
is
is it?
that?
I do not know, but it is a phenomenon that I know that our children are walking through. And so, what can we do to make them feel better? I want my home to be a haven for my kids, that no matter where they're at, what they're going through, home is a safe place to land. And I think mom always sets the tone in the home. She just always does.
They're coming
Right.
home. All these things that have gone through our
Yeah.
minds when they're gone, like, how's that
Yes.
relationship with Sally? Is your job going okay? Is your apartment rent going up? And we want
Yes.
to ask all these things so the tension's in us. Do you
Yes.
have any suggestion on how we just welcome them without all of this baggage that they can almost see in our face?
Right, right. Well, I think the best thing you can do is care for yourself beforehand and think it through. If you know there's a topic that is emotionally triggering for you, that's on you. Then you do the work. Whether you need to go for a walk, you need to journal, you need to find a counselor. If you're a woman of faith, then you need to pray. But take care of yourself and manage some of those emotions. I think it's really important for women to have emotional confidence, to know what to do, to respond well so that it doesn't get all this stirred up inside of us. We got to take
No,
care of ourselves.
I think so much we put on our kids and we really have to look into ourselves. It's funny
Yes.
you said that about turning 14 when we go home. I can remember well into adulthood going to my parents' house and becoming a slob. I mean, my house is so neat. So now when my kids come home, I just look at all the shoes by the front door. I look at all the jackets hanging over the thing rather than
Yes,
hanging up. And I
yes.
just say, okay, it's just a week. It's just
It
a week. It's just a
Yes,
week.
it's just a week. Those 14 coffee mugs that I keep
Yes,
running through
yes.
the dishwasher. You know what we did in our family? This was probably before COVID. I was tired of doing all the cooking and the prep, and I said, "You know what? We're gonna take turns, and your family gets this meal, and your family gets this meal, and your family gets this meal." And then they're responsible to buy all the food, cook all the food, serve the food, and clean up. It has taken all the pressure off me and my husband because I'm like, "Honey, get out of the kitchen. You're cleaning the dishes again."
No, my this year for the first time, my son and his girlfriend are coming home, and I said, "You are cooking Christmas Eve," and he wrote back and said, "Fine," because I
Yes,
just wasn't up for it. I just was like, "I
right.
can't do it." I'll tell you a funny story. My mom used to label. I thought you were going to say this. She used to label our cups. So she would take sticky notes and say, "This is Denise's. This is da 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 da." Da." But I
Right,
finally understand how my mother felt. How do you feel? Let's talk about when a kid comes home and they have chosen a very different lifestyle than yours, whether
right.
it be religious, whether it be, I don't know, kids can have lots of different kinds of
Exactly.
lifestyles. How do
Right,
you handle that? You're all going to church, or you're all going to temple, or you're praying at the dinner table, and they're
right,
completely off the table with that. What's your
right.
advice to parents for that?
Well, first of all, I think this is the season of listening. Our adult kids want our empathy and our understanding. We don't have to agree with what they're doing, but we owe it to them to sit down and say, "Tell me all about it. Tell me where you're coming from." And then just listen. Listening does not equal agreeing. And I think sometimes moms are afraid to listen because they're like, well, if I listen, then they'll think I agree with it. Your kids know where you stand on everything.
Mhm.
They were raised in your home. They deserve the dignity of being listened to and empathizing with. If you want to go to church and your child doesn't, you say, "Hey, we're going to church at 6. Are you up for it?" And when they say no, you just say, "Okay, sounds great." Don't make a big deal about it. Don't make them feel bad about it. It's all about just this grace towards each other and actually kindness. Could we just be a little more kind?
Everything you're saying is right. It's just always hard work. I looked at this article online that you wrote, and it said tips for joyful holiday season, longing for the Christmas past. And that was a sentiment I could really relate to, because once those kids are grown, if there's no grandbabies, there's a whole different feel around the holidays. But I want
Yeah.
to go into some of your topics. First, you
Yeah.
wrote defining expectations. Give us that
Yes.
advice on defining expectations.
Okay, well, first of all, let's understand what an expectation is. It is the
Okay.
strong belief that you have about the proper way someone should behave or something should happen. So, moms have all these expectations around Christmas. It should look like this, and we're going to do it here, and we're going to eat this, and these people are going to be present, and this is what it looks like. And if it doesn't go like that, mama is going to be unhappy. And what that does is expectations are just the fuel for disappointment. And when you take disappointment far enough, it can become embitteredness. And then whenever you're around these people, you're just like, well, I'm going to reject them because they rejected me. And actually, that's not true because we can't expect the holidays to look the same way they always did. That's just not healthy. That's not wise because these adult children now have a say. They will have families of their own. You will have to learn to share. And so this season is all about, again, going back to a mom taking care of that inner stuff that is all about her and not about her kids.
I love that. All about her and not about our kids. We have to step outside of ourselves.
Yep.
So the second thing you wrote was practicing adaptability and flexibility.
That's the key. Key. That is the key that unlocks the joy of the holiday season. When the kids say, "We're not coming home because we're gonna be with my wife's parents," you have to say, "Okay, that sounds great. We'll see you next year, hopefully." Like, that when our first child got married, we had this they came to us and said, "We've decided that we're gonna spend Thanksgiving with you and Christmas with my wife's family, and then we're gonna flip-flop." So we did that for years. Now the rest of the family, they would be like, "Oh, Keenan and Michelle aren't gonna be here this year." I said, "Yeah, it is sad, but they'll be with us next year." Everybody has to learn to adapt. Flexibility is key. It's just so important. You will have more joy, you will have more peace, and you won't be so frustrated.
And maybe you'll find some time for yourself because no one's around.
Exactly. Maybe you and your husband can go somewhere and do something
Yeah,
fun.
exactly. Okay, I love this one. Understanding that our adult kids aren't responsible for our happiness because our lives were so filled raising our kids. And now
Yes,
they're gone and they're building their own lives. People ask me, what makes you happy? I say, when my kids are around. And really,
yes.
they're not responsible for my happiness. So tell us
Right,
more about
right,
that.
right. This again, it's on mom. It's on what she's gonna do with herself, what she's gonna do with her giftings and her strengths. What can she look forward to? What new thing could spring up? I didn't start podcasting or writing or coaching until my nest was empty. Maybe number 4 was heading out the door. But I had been a speaker for a long time, and whenever I would speak, people would say, "Hey, you need to write a book." And I'm like, "Oh, I should write a book. When am I gonna write a book? I should learn how to write a book because I'd never written anything publicly." And
Right.
so there is so much in us that you can discover and you can just try.
It's hard though. You really have to have confidence. I didn't do this until I was an empty nest and that sort of thing too. A completely different career. But it's hard. You really step out of your safety zone. And
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
it's
but
hard.
that's where the good stuff happens.
Utilizing open communication. So I love this. Help us with that. What is open communication? Maybe some tips on opening conversations, that sort of
Right.
thing.
Right. So when it comes to the holidays and your kids do become older and move on and have their own lives, there comes a time when you all have to sit down and have a conversation and say, "Hey, can we talk about the holidays? I want to know, what are you thinking about for the holidays this year? Or how would you like them to look now?"
Okay, I don't know.
Oh, so you're telling me you don't have an opinion and it doesn't matter to you.
Then they do have an opinion when they come home.
And then what matters to you most? Because for
Mhm.
some, our kids are going to value different things. And maybe the meal is most important. Maybe it's time sitting on the couch all piled together watching their favorite movie. Maybe it's going sledding. Maybe it's going shopping. Whatever's most meaningful to you. For us, it's our annual gingerbread decorating competition. We are fierce competitors because they're all artistic. And I'm like, I have zero artistic ability in the way of like drawing and such, and so I'm just like, "Oh, I'm just gonna make I don't even know what I'm gonna make, but I'm not gonna win because you all are so talented."
What you just said there struck something for me. You said maybe it's your meal, maybe it's piled on the couch watching a movie, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. All those are very idyllic. I think the holidays have become harder with social media and with okay, everyone else is sledding, everyone else is doing gingerbread competitions, everybody else is in the kitchen and no one's making a mess but they're all cooking.
No, it's all a big mess.
Right. But anyway, I'm just saying, I
Yeah.
think the stress on families to make it special makes it even harder. Maybe that's the expectation thing.
Yeah, maybe it's just make it comfortable. Make it comfortable. If y'all don't wanna do anything together. At least
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
about feeling comfortable, I think.
This last one, maybe we talked about it, choosing what matters most and letting go of the rest.
Right, that's just it. I think you'll have more peace if you just let things go. Let it go. If it doesn't matter to anybody, I made these popcorn balls for 35 years and I used to hide them for my grandma, then I would hide them for my mom. And I asked, asked my kids last year, I said, "Do you like those popcorn balls?" They're like, "No, we don't need them." I'm like, "What?" What? I was like, wow, I don't have to make those popcorn balls? I'm shocked.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, I
Isn't
guess.
it funny?
I think the hard part is I don't know how to say this. It's like when they come home and you're right, being accepting and all of that, but you're not composting. The big joke now on social
Yeah.
media, on TV is everything in my mother's refrigerator is 20 years old or whatever.
It's
I mean,
expired.
there
Yeah.
isn't, but it's hard to deal with all that.
Yeah, you just say, "You know what? You get your choices and I get mine, so back off." Sometimes I
Yeah.
think we gotta get a little spicy.
Yeah, I
We
think
just
you're
gotta
right.
we just gotta hand it back instead of getting, like, offended and hurt.
I think you're
Give it
right.
back.
Okay,
Yeah.
so now before we go to your takeaways, I want you to tell our listeners a little bit about your free resource called Your Kids Are Grown Now. What will they find in this if they go to the episode notes and download it?
Yeah, so this is a robust guide just to help midlife moms understand the different phases of midlife motherhood. I divide it into 3 phases: the empty feeling mom, like her children have first left and she's desperately sad and doesn't know what to do with herself. And then there's the questioning mom where she's like, well, wow, what is this going to look like now? What is this going to look like now? I wonder what I should do with my life. I wonder what's next. And then there's the celebratory mom who's like, this is not bad. And this, the emptiness is a lovely place to be. It's not bad. I know myself better. I'm walking in what I was supposed to be doing. Yeah. So it's just kind of helping moms know what to expect in each of those areas.
That's great. All right. So, Pamela, before we close, I like my guests to leave our listeners with two takeaways they'd like them to remember from this interview.
Right. I would say the two things you want to do with your adult kids during the holidays is listen well. Listen, listen, listen. You don't even have to ask any question except tell me what you're thinking. Tell me what's going on. And then be flexible. A rigid mom is an unhappy mom. A rigid mom who says it has to be this way, this way, this way, she's going to be unhappy. But a flexible mom learns that the family ebbs and flows and things will change and it's going to be okay.
That's great. Thank you so much for joining us. I wish you a joyous holiday season with your family and a really messy kitchen during that gingerbread making contest. It sounds like a
Oh,
lot of fun.
thank you. Thank you. And to you and yours too.
Thank you so much. So that was great. I think Pam had a lot of very interesting things to say. And now we're going to move on to Rabbi Slatkin. I introduced him at the onset of the episode, so we're anxious to hear what he has to say. So welcome, Rabbi Slatkin. It's great that you were able to join us today. When I wrote to you, you sent me a list of key points about adult kids coming home for the holidays or anytime you're visiting your adult kids. And I'd like you to just expand a little bit on each of those points. The first one you said to me was boundaries. You say that your adult child will probably want to set boundaries. Let them. So tell us about this. What do you mean by that?
Sure. So, I mean, it's very, it's normal for parents to have a hard time kind of giving space for their children because of the love you have for your children. You want to spend time with them when you want to spend time with them, which is not always a good time for them. There may be differences of opinions that you have if they are in a relationship, if they're married, you may not agree with some of the things that they do in terms of as a couple or as parents. So there's a lot of room for inserting our own opinions. So when children are trying to navigate how to be an adult and how to be a child, it would be healthy for them to set boundaries so that they can feel safe, so that they can maintain their autonomy as their own person and not just like your appendage, but their own adult, and to learn how to individuate. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. The challenge is like when it becomes so much about boundaries that it's all about boundaries that I can't be in a relationship with you. That's where it gets a little bit problematic. To set healthy boundaries, to share what's comfortable for them when they're available, when they're not available, and for the adults to be able to respect them, the parents to be able to respect them. I think that's a fair ask,
I
even
think
though
that's
it's hard.
true. It is hard. It's hard. This is something that's never come up before. I know that you do this couples counseling. Be on the same page with your spouse or partner. I could see that it could get bad if you're respecting the boundaries and your husband or partner is not. Do you discuss this beforehand? How might you prepare to be on the same page with your spouse or partner?
Sure. And I see this a lot. I see this with the kids, adult kids, and I see it with parents. They have different opinions about their children or their in-laws, different relationships. And when the holidays are about to come, if they can have a conversation about it and really be clear about what they need, the type of support they need from their partner, it's going to be really helpful. So whether it's the parents or whether it's the children, being a united front is going to be helpful to get their message across. Because usually what happens if they're not a united front, one person leaves feeling marginalized and it's a very uncomfortable situation. And they're not going to want to be with you the next holiday, or you're not going to want to have them the next holiday because it's just too much tension. If you're both clear about when you're feeling triggered, what are the type of things that you can foresee based on past experiences, it's a great thing to talk about beforehand and get clarity about what you need from your partner to support you. So that you also like you're not contradicting each other, you're not doing anything that would kind of get in the way or make the other person, your spouse, feel bad.
I think that's really I think for the adult kids too. I remember with my husband and I, when we used to visit his parents, I would say, now compliment me every so often or support what I say. Didn't always happen, but we did try to set those ground rules. So I think that's a great idea.
It's important, especially if you have a history of challenges and conflict in that relationship and holiday time.
Right. Even not conflict, just not always feeling seen. When you go to his house, he's the child. When you go to
Right.
your house, you're the child. So there's a whole different relationship going on there. And it's important to figure out how to both support your parents, but also support your partner that you're bringing home or your husband. That's a big circle.
Yeah, you want to be seen. You don't want to just be like a they forget
Oh,
about you once they get to
here she comes again, the one who took
yeah,
my son.
yeah.
Okay, then you say, this one just sent me, don't get stressed. Oh, come on. This is a very stressful time, whether they're coming for the holidays, whether they're visiting for a week in the summer with the grandkids. It's stress, crazy stress.
It is crazy stress, but it's all dependent on our mindset. If we're going to let it bother us, and if we're going to just relax and try to not control the situation, the more we try to control the outcome, the more stressful it's going to be because everything
Yeah.
has to be a certain way, and we're not able to be flexible when things don't go that way, which usually happens. So the more that you can just do your best to be present and to just expect the unexpected, it will be a lot less of a stressful experience. The stress about them coming is going to impact your relationship too. So it's like, we're entertaining, we're going to have this, we're having our parents come over for the holidays. Oh, everything has to look, let's say maybe the daughter-in-law, like everything has to be perfect and the house has to be clean. And then, you get in fights with the husband and with the children. And it's, in the end, it might be a nice experience, but the time it takes to get there and prepare, it's miserable. It's not something that people are going to look forward to on a year-to-year basis if there's so much stress going into the preparation for the holidays. So doing your best, not pressure yourself that you have to impress anyone, that you have to be Martha Stewart or have this perfect table, but that do the best that you can. And the main point is that everyone loves each other, regardless of how good the meal is, how fancy the decor is. The main point is that everyone's spending time together at this time of year.
You're right. I think also for a daughter-in-law in particular, your mother-in-law could be judgmental. Oh my gosh, she's not using cloth napkins. Maybe all you could do was find the paper ones in the bottom drawer, but I think what you're saying makes sense. If you can let that go, it might be a better experience for everyone.
Yeah.
Now, these are a couple questions that we didn't talk about before, but I want to ask you, particularly being a rabbi. We are a secular podcast, and all your advice is, certainly across the board. But how about when your child has strayed from the family religion? Your child comes home and it is a religious holiday, whether it be the high holidays for the Jews, Christmas, Hanukkah, Easter, and you're observant. How do you deal with your child and his or her partner coming home and they're not observant?
I think the main thing is to be accepting and loving, because if you want them to, if you want them one day to even want to come back to observance, you want to have them have a positive experience. So the main thing is just not to force anything on them, just to invite them to have them there sharing the holiday with you. That's the main thing. Giving them that unconditional love, no judgment. That's going to be the best way to have the holiday. Now, look, it depends on the religion and the customs and the laws. Some things can become more, I would say, tricky depending. But I think for most people, I mean, we have laws in terms of you're not supposed to drive on the Sabbath.
Oh, right, right.
But now I would say in terms of for Christians, I don't think like things like that wouldn't be an issue. So maybe they're not going to church with you, but you can still have them over and have a meal with them and celebrate the holiday regardless and not try to impose anything on them or make them feel bad because they're not
Yeah.
on the same level as you of observance.
Yeah, and all of that's very hard, particularly for a very observant family. How do you prepare for adult child bringing home someone they're introducing to you for the first time?
How do you prepare as parents?
Yeah, as parents.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit nerve-wracking because you don't know, you've never met them before. Maybe you've heard about them, but it's a little bit nerve-wracking. The main thing is just bite your,
Bite your tongue.
bite your tongue, like don't say anything. Be friendly, ask questions, but not be too nosy. Just try to be warm and try to be relaxed as much as possible. And also to tell yourself that because they brought them home doesn't mean that they're going to get married tomorrow. So could be this person is not going to be the one that they have a long-term relationship with. So don't get too anxious right away. But just do your best to be cordial like you would any guest that you would have in your house.
All of this takes a lot of self-control. What about sharing a room when they come home? Do you instill your values or do you let them make their decision?
That really depends on where you're coming from, what you feel is appropriate. And also it depends on if you have other people in the house.
Yeah, I guess
You
that's
have
true.
younger
That's
kids or
true.
something that you don't want them to see that. If it's just you and your spouse and it doesn't bother you, and then that's a different story. But if you have, it always becomes more complicated when you have impressionable little ones that you don't necessarily want to, say, set a certain example for.
Or the parents. The more, it's a whole different world now. Let's say my daughter was coming home and my mother was here. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? So three
right.
generations, my mother might have a cow and I have to respect how she would feel. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yeah. So it's about being understanding where everyone's coming from, who's in play there, who's going to be at your house, and then trying to find creative solutions. So, maybe the neighbor has a guest room, the other, and
Yeah.
like, and trying to tell your child, even though the child's gonna maybe have a harder time, but look, my mother's here. It's really uncomfortable for her. We want your boyfriend to feel comfortable here, but it just wouldn't be appropriate for my mother. Let's try to find a way that we can give him accommodations nearby so that you can spend time together, but just can sleep somewhere else, for example.
Right, good idea. Okay, so you're a relationship therapist, and I read a little bit about is it Imago? Am I
Imago.
saying that right?
Yes, that's
Imago.
correct.
And so I'm sure you have a few tools, and I feel like any relationship is a relationship. Some of the tools that you share with husband and wife to get along can be used when you're dealing with your adult children. So, what are some of the ways to respond in a non-judgmental way when you're chatting with your adult child? Your adult child says something you don't quite agree with or you think is a alarm. What might be a good way to respond? Give us a few talking points that parents might use while their kids are visiting.
Sure. One thing is really helpful is to learn how to listen. We definitely have opinions that might be different than our children. Our first instinct is to react, to respond, maybe to judge, and that's going to turn our kids off and push them away. So even before you even suggest anything or ask questions, we have couples and or children, parents and children, teach them how to mirror. And that means to repeat back what the other person says. Now, obviously, you want to do it in a way, in this case, this feels a little bit more natural because they're going to think you're trying to do some type of technique on them. But don't respond. They'll say something, you'll just say, "Oh, it sounds like you're," just kind of paraphrase. It sounds like you want to, without interpreting. Sounds like you really want to have your, boyfriend come home to our house for 2 weeks. You gotta tell me more about that. And just let them talk and just try to get curious instead of being judgmental,
Hmm.
and let them share what's going on. And then at some point, if you are feeling, if you want to share your opinion, or if they're asking, you could say like, "Are you asking for my opinion, or you just want to be heard?" And if they're asking for your opinion, you say, "Well, like, here's what I think," and you can share it in a kind way, and just say, "Well, from my perspective, it makes sense why you would validate them. It makes sense why you would want to do X, Y, and Z, and really would like to be able to do that for you. And because of our circumstances, it's not going to be possible to do this. Let's find a way together to make this work." So you're trying to join them together as opposed to being against them. But it's really important just to be in touch with your reactivity. Because if you're coming from a place of reactivity, it's not a good time to say anything.
That's true. Sometimes when your adult child comes home and they live far away, it's your first opportunity to say, "How are you doing at your job? What are you doing?" How do you learn about those things from them? Maybe you're worried about some of the career choices they're making or their living choices. You don't want to jump on them as soon as they walk in the door. How do you gradually bring that kind of stuff up because it's your FaceTime to be able to talk about some real things?
Sure, that makes sense. You want to know what's going on, but
Yeah,
and you want to ask them right away.
right.
You have to ask yourself how much this is coming from my anxiety. If
Mhm.
you're feeling anxious, like, "I need to find this information," they will pick up on it and they will feel the anxiety and they will either shut down or they will get reactive. They might not be vulnerable. The most important thing is just to be in relationship with them. When they come home, give them a hug, give them something to eat, take care of them, maybe spend some time with them, have some fun with them, just ease in and let them do the talking. Let them open up and share, how are you doing? And like, how was your flight? Make small talk.
Mhm.
Don't talk about anything too heavy. Just let yourselves get reacquainted and connect. And then as the time that they're staying with you progresses, you can gradually bring up these things, maybe go for a walk or, share something you're concerned about. But for sure, it's not something I would do right away. You want to make sure you have that relationship there. and that connection. Even if you have a relationship via phone or via Zoom or whatever it is, focus when they come home just on making them feel welcome at home. Then when it's the time when you feel more connected, that'll be a time to talk about it. Let's say after dinner, you're sitting on the couch and everyone's just talking, and then you can kind of open up and maybe they'll start sharing about what's going on.
But I love what you said, try to figure out whether it's your anxiety or just the need to, because sometimes it only is your anxiety and you've got to put a lid on that. I appreciate your time today. I would love you to leave our listeners with one or two takeaways to get them prepped for their visits with their adult children for the holidays. What do you hope they take away from what you just said? The most important
I
thing.
think the most important thing is to do your best to enjoy the time with your kids, especially if you don't see them very often. This is a very special time together that we would like both of you to remember, and you want them to come back. So really focusing on enjoying each other. Parents worry all the time, and we need to be able to give up control and to realize now they're adults now, as much as we're there to help them, but they're not little kids anymore. So we have to be able to let go and to try to empower them, to trust them that they can make the right decisions. And when it's appropriate to insert ourselves, but just to be mindful that we cannot control every little thing they do, and we don't want to know everything they're doing either, probably.
Probably. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciated your taking the time today.
No, my
And
pleasure, Denise. Nice meeting you.
thank you so much to Pamela and Rabbi Slatkin. What I took away from both of these conversations, that we as parents need to be mindful of our actions and our mindset. They are adults now. Both guests encouraged us to be curious, flexible, and welcoming. Now let's hope we can just do that. And remember, there's no perfect holidays. We need to lower our expectations and just have fun. I know Kirsten's going to be mad she's not with me today, and I missed her too, but I just had to get in here and get this one done. Thank you so much again to Connie Gort Fisher, our audio and production engineer. You have no idea the work she puts into making these sound okay. Please write to us at biteyourtonguepodcast@gmail.com. Share your comments and ideas. And also, please consider supporting our efforts by going to our website, biteyourtonguepodcast.com, and buying us a virtual cup of coffee. You can make a donation as low as $5. And lastly, remember, follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We put so much out there and we think you'll get a lot from it. Have a great holiday season, a happy new year. And remember, most of the time during the holidays, you probably have to bite your tongue.